Yo, what's up, chefs? It's Vinny. We have made some massive improvements to our Tempest Flurry Herald Chain Invoker, and at this point, I can confidently say that this is the best and probably most fun build I've ever played in PoE 2. It does everything that the previous version could do, but basically twice as fast. Just go ahead and take a look. Hello, you beautiful people. I hope you enjoyed the intro and are having a great weekend so far. First things first, as always, we do have a very detailed written planner up here on Mobalytics. This is an addition to the previous Mobalytics guide, so it's just a new variant for the Holopalm setup. As always, I've got brand new, updated. I've kind of like tidied up these trade links, so these are going to be very helpful for the new Holopalm setup. Done the same thing for the skill gem section. It probably looks similar to the previous variant's skill gem section, but this is completely revamped to be congruent with the new Holopalm setup. Same thing with the passive tree down here. I've got tips and tricks. If you're not quite the same level as me, that's perfectly fine. I've got some, tips here to show you how to still make it work for those of you that are low level but are interested in playing the build. In addition to that, as always, of course, I've got the POE link up here as well for those of you that like to nerd out on POE. One thing I do just want to point out about this really quick, for those of you that maybe don't use POE, here's a reason why maybe you should look into it at the very least. If you open this up, it'll bring you to POE Ninja. You can then just click this button to open my build and path of building. This is my POE planner, so it's already perfectly configured. You don't need to do any changes to it whatsoever. It is good to go. There's nothing funky going on in here. So everything is going to be one-to-one with how my character is. Something you can do if you're concerned about your gear, you're trying to figure out, is your gear the difference maker in the build functioning properly? You can come to the items section. You can go back into game. You can hover over one of your items, hit Control-C, which will copy it. You can come back into POE, Control-V, which will paste it, and this will give you a breakdown in the effective difference between the two items. So obviously, it's only showing the difference for one of the rings because it's the same as my previous ring. But if you had a completely different ring, it would show you, what's the difference in damage for my two rings, what's the difference in effective hit pool. All of this information would then be present, and you could kind of get an idea of how much of a difference is your gear versus my gear making. With that out of the way, I know some of you like to skip around in these guides a little bit, so I've included some very relevant chapters in this YouTube video. You can find those down below, and hopefully those should help you out. And let's go ahead and get started with the guide though. First things first, I want to go ahead and cover the core premise / core functionalities of the build. This is not going to be a super detailed explanation because I did cover most of it in the previous video, and you can also find very detailed explanations of it in the written planner. But I do just want to give a quick synopsis so you're not, so people that are new to this video aren't completely lost. First things first, we are still using the tech that chains Herald of Ice with Armor Explosion. We are breaking armor with Herald of Ice thanks to Ul Natal's Embrace. This is triggering our Armor Explosion, which then goes back to Herald of Ice, and this creates the infinite chain effect that is causing the massive explosions on your screen. One thing I do want to clarify that I didn't make super clear in the previous video is that although Herald of Thunder plays a part here in helping us freeze enemies continuously, it is not actually a part of the infinite chain. You would need to make some additional changes to the build for that to be possible, and I don't think it's super practical to do so. So it is technically just an infinite chain between Herald of Ice and Armor Explosion, but this does not create an effective difference. It doesn't matter that Herald of Thunder isn't infinitely chaining. It's still creating the massive explosions, AoE clear, obviously. Moving on from that, just to give a breakdown of what you're going to be doing in maps. When the map starts, you're going to go in, you're going to kill a few packs with Tempest Flurry, and now also Staggering Palm, which is an addition to the Hollow Palm setup. This is going to build up energy for cast on critical, which will trigger Profane Ritual. That will then allow you to use Charge Staff, and from that point forward, your Charge Staff is going to be freezing enemies, shocking enemies. That will be proccing your Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ice, and causing the massive chains. Something I do also want to point out is not only are we getting power charges from cast on critical Profane Ritual now, but we've also moved our Aelith's Chimes and Culmination combo from our Quarterstaff Strike down into Staggering Palm since we've added this in. So this is another option for power charge generation during maps. It's primarily necessary. It is mandatory for bossing. This is how we get our power charges there. But in maps, this does also help, especially at that beginning ramp-up phase when you have no power charges. You'll quickly build up combo with Tempest Flurry, and your first Staggering Palm will give you a couple of power charges at that point, so you can kind of get off the floor a little bit quicker. One other thing that I think is briefly worth noting is that we've also swapped out Flicker Strike for Falling Thunder at this point. This is once again primarily for our bossing setup because Flicker Strike, its damage does not scale particularly well with Hollow Palm. However, Culmination in Falling Thunder combined with our other support gems and the rate at which we can build up combo for it on bosses thanks to our attack speed makes this just an optimal choice for one-shotting bosses, and it's still very, very effective. You can also use this during maps to deal with things like Delirium mini-bosses or just any particular pesky rares, but you shouldn't have to do that often. You don't even need to do it for Delirium mini-bosses, but it is just a tiny bit more efficient if you want to kind of like work it into your rotation. That's up to you ultimately. And lastly, right before we hop into the mapping demo, I did just want to quickly point out that this is clearly a critical hit chance setup, and I cannot stress the importance of getting to 100% crit chance for all of your relevant skills enough. This pairs with our Ascendancy node, Sunder My Enemies, which allows our critical hits to ignore non-negative enemy LE resist. And this is very important because assuming you have all of the chaos damage required to create the Herald of Ice armor explosion chain, you have all of the cold damage and lightning damage required to be freezing and shocking effectively, none of that will matter if the enemies have positive elemental resistance and you're not ignoring it, because their resistance will nuke your damage and all of a sudden nothing's going to function properly. Thankfully, it's very easy for us to hit 100% crit chance thanks to things like pinpoint critical or inevitable critical in the case of Falling Thunder. We're getting 26% more critical hit chance from charge regulation, which is active all the time in maps or bossing, etc. And then if you want to just get a little bit more detailed info on it, you can of course come to my POE. You can see that all of my skills will be at 100% crit chance. If you come to the calculations tab, choose a skill, and then come down to the crit section, hover over main hand crit chance, you can see everything that is coming together to build up 100% crit, and the only item that we're using is our amulet. The amulet is very easy to craft. They're also quite cheap to buy at this point, so it is not complicated to get that. Everything else is from the passive tree. Hollow Palm technique is obviously playing a big part there, and then you can see down at the very bottom it lists pinpoint critical, which is the support gem, and then charge infusion, which is the spirit skill. So it is very easy to get to 100% crit chance. You cannot skip this step. If you skip this step, the build won't work, period. So just wanted to make that super crystal clear. And now let's go ahead and hop into the mapping demonstration. And as always, we're going to be doing this with a regular 6-mod Delirious Instilled Desecrated map. Nothing super special here. Let's go ahead and hop into it. Same as the previous build, there's going to be a slight ramp up phase at the beginning of the map, but then it's going to speed up super duper quickly. One thing I do want to point out, or that you should maybe keep in mind, is I wouldn't worry too much about keeping your Staggering Palm buff active at all times, because it's a little bit wonky once you start just like one-shotting everything. It doesn't seem to give you the buff all that consistently, but you should weave it in every once in a while because we have the armor break support gem in here, so this will just give us an infinite supply of endurance charges, which will ultimately make us more tanky thanks to charge regulation. But let's go ahead and hop to it. As you can see, we're moving around very fast with Tempest Flurry. We're going to build up a little bit of combo with Tempest Flurry. Now we're going to use Staggering Palm. That's going to give us power charges. We'll use those on Charge Staff. And now the magic is going to go ahead and start to happen. Yeah, as you can see, we're pretty much fully ramped up now. Everything is starting to just get absolutely destroyed. We've got a breach here, which would be perfect to showcase this. At this point, I'll just weave in a couple of staggering palms here and there, try and get a few extra endurance charges. There we got one. We're good to go. Not worried about the buff. Just want the endurance charge. Even though it's really not mandatory. Like, as you can see, it's kind of like offense is our best defense right now. We're just, obliterating everything, even off our screen. And probably the hardest thing about this build is getting good with Tempest Flurry movement, to where you're not just like banging your head on a whole bunch of obstacles, which can be a bit annoying at times, but if you can get past that, then obviously you can see the appeal of the build with what we're doing right now. I mean, the explosions are just so ridiculous. The speed is so ridiculous. I mean, it's hard to beat this. It should make sense why this is the best build I've played in PoE 2. And yeah, we'll just zoom through the rest of this map really quick, see if we can find the boss super quickly just to demonstrate that. If it takes too long, then I'll just go ahead and swing it over to the T4 Xesht Demonstration, of course. And yeah, it looks like the boss is hiding somewhere, so I'll just go ahead and swing it over to the T4 Xesht Demonstration. Catch you guys there. Alrighty, here we are at the T4 Xesht. I'm going to carry my charge staff into the Xesht fight, so I'm going to refresh it with the power charges that I have remaining. And this is going to be very similar to the Flicker Strike setup. We're going to build up combo with Tempest Flurry. We're then going to expend that combo on Staggering Palm to get power charges for Falling Thunder, and then the boss is going to get nuked. Here, I'm just going to build up charges or combo. That should be enough. And there it is. Easy peasy. With my current setup, it takes about 40 combo. I use 40 combo. I use Staggering Palm. That gives me the power charges. And then I use Falling Thunder with that same 40 combo. And of course, the power charges as well. And that will one-shot T4 Xesht. If you have slightly worse gear, you might need to stack up a little bit more combo, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. You might have to dodge 1 to 2 mechanics at most. But obviously, you can get it to the point to where you don't have to really worry about any of the mechanics. Alrighty, so at this point, we're just going to primarily cover everything that has changed from the previous version to this one. Of course, the primary thing is the fact that we're now using Hollow Palm, but this does come with a pretty massive innate loss of damage, which means we do have to make a multitude of other changes to sort of supplement that, so to speak. My recommendation, first I'll say if you've got the previous version working, then transitioning to this one will be relatively simple. If you haven't got either version working, or like you haven't even made your character yet, I'd recommend starting off with the leveling guide. That'll be linked in the description. Then you should try to do the quarterstaff variant because that's easier to get running. And then you should move to this one. So if you've already got the previous one working, you're pretty much good to go. It'll be relatively simple to transition. Let's go ahead and start off with the skill gems. Not too much has changed here. Of course, we are now using Staggering Palm. I'm very wishy-washy on whether or not I think having Heavy Swing and Heft or A-list Chimes and Culmination for the last two supports here is the best. I'm just going to be transparent. I really don't know which is the best. If you like the buff that's shooting out the projectiles in maps, which is like kind of helpful, then you should definitely rock Heavy Swing Heft. If you're not so concerned about that, you're mainly just concerned about getting the endurance charges plus the power charges with A-list Chimes, then you should just rock A-list Chimes and Culmination here. I think especially for Simulacrum, which this build can do T4 Simulacrum, I'll put up like a little small video showing that over here right now. Then I would definitely recommend for Simulacrum using A-list Chimes and Culmination. It makes it feel a lot smoother. Moving on from Staggering Palm, though, most of the supports here outside of that are pretty self-explanatory. We've also got Falling Thunder now. This is going to it's very similar to Flicker Strike as far as the support gems go, and it's fulfilling the same purpose for us. It's going to allow us to one-shot bosses. You can also use this in maps to kill the Deli mini-bosses, as I mentioned before. We're really just amping this up with as much damage as possible. There's nothing super complicated here. It should be relatively self-explanatory. And then outside of that, everything else should be relatively the same as far as I can recall. We're still using Elemental Expression, but you have the option to drop that for I Am the Thunder if you'd like. I think I Am the Thunder is probably better, but I just kind of like Elemental Expression. It's pretty flashy, makes you feel like you're playing a Beyblade basically, which is kind of cool. But yeah, outside of that, everything else is pretty much the same. I will say we did change one support in Charge Staff. We dropped Innervate for Embitter, and this is actually relatively important. I should mention this because that innate loss of damage that we get by going to Hollow Palm made our Charge Staff a little bit less efficient at freezing enemies. Therefore, we put in Embitter. This kind of fixes that problem, or in part fixes that problem for us. So now, once again, Charge Staff is freezing quite effectively. And lastly, just before we bounce over to the passive tree changes, I did just want to mention for the T4 Simulacrum setup, Cast on Critical and Herald of Ice are effectively useless, so you're going to want to swap them out for Blasphemy and Ghost Dance. I will include a variant in the Mobalytics planner for T4 Simulacrum, but realistically the only thing that changes is we're putting in Blasphemy with Temp Chains, Magnified Area, Ritualistic Curse, and Slow Potency. Blasphemy is incredibly strong in Simulacrum because of the circular nature of the arenas, and it makes it infinitely easier. Cannot stress that enough. And then Ghost Dance just gives us an extra layer of defensive utility. The reason why these two are useless is because Cast on Critical requires corpses, or I should say Profane Ritual requires corpses to actually be used up to get the power charges, and the Delirium monsters, when they die, they just kind of evaporate. They don't leave corpses behind, so this will do literally nothing for you. And then Herald of Ice, similarly, the Delirious monsters can't really be frozen, so you're never really going to be proccing Herald of Ice, so that's why you should swap those two out. Next up, we're going to go and cover the passive tree and gear changes, which there are a fair bit of them, since we did have to supplement the damage loss from Hollow Palm. And something I do just want to point out really quickly before we really dive into it is that although this build is significantly faster, like the Hollow Palm variant is significantly faster than the Quarterstaff previous one, it does come with a downside, which is that we are a fair bit squishier. The previous setup, we had over 90,000 effective hit pool. We had a decently higher physical max hit as well. But due to the fact that we're now taking Chaos Inoculation and we just have less resources, like less spare passive tree points to allocate towards defensive nodes, we are a decent bit squishier. Thankfully, this is supplemented very effectively by the fact that we're moving at light speed, we have decent range on our attacks, we have massive explosions occurring, so our offense is a very good defensive measure in this setup, but I did just want to be transparent about that and point it out. With that being said, it's not a pushover. I've still only died 17 times, and I'm level 96, but probably 4 to 5 of those deaths actually did come during the transition from the Quarterstaff variant to this one, while just trying to like figure it out, and things weren't working quite as I wanted them to. I had to make optimizations, etc. So just wanted to be transparent. If you'd rather be immortal than be quick, then you should stick with the Quarterstaff variant. If you'd rather be quick, but you're okay with not being necessarily immortal, then this one's obviously going to be better. And I do think the Hollow Palm setup is honestly significantly better if you get it running. But with that being cleared up, got that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the more specific changes. So first things first, we no longer have the Quarterstaff set up over here because we're now running Hollow Palm, so that freed up a lot of points. But with those points, we're pretty much using those to come down here and grab this additional jewel socket, which I'll kind of talk about the jewels here in just a second. We're also allocating more points towards just regular % increased attack damage now via the Blinding Strike wheel, I suppose you could call this, and then also the Concussive Attack wheel up here as well. And that's once again to help supplement the damage, because we do need to meet certain breakpoints on our Herald of Ice in specific for the chain effect to actually happen effectively. At this point, as you can see, I only have 1700 chaos damage top end sitting in my hideout, and this is obviously enough to make everything function as intended. You can check what the numbers are in POE. They're going to obviously be calculated differently because it's including my buffs and stuff like that. But just sitting in hideout, we're sitting at 1700 top end, and everything works just fine. Outside of that, there's not too much that has changed, or too much else that has changed for the passive tree. We dropped this power charge wheel right here because we just As far as I'm concerned, we don't really need that many power charges. We're getting up to 5 by just getting this notable up here, which seems to be enough. And like I said, this variant is pretty point hungry, or passive point hungry. So wherever you can find areas to drop stuff, to allocate new things, that's going to be a good idea, which is kind of what we did. We kind of just like trimmed down as much as we could so we could fill in these other areas that are pretty important now. Moving on from that, we are also now anointing Patient Barrier instead of Subterfuge Mask. The reason for this is because we're taking Agile Succession with this setup for more attack speed, and the evasion rating helps. And so ultimately, this is 4 points right here for Subterfuge Mask, whereas to come up to Patient Barrier, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're just saving 1 passive point by changing the Amulet Anoint. But like I said before, the passive points are important with this one, so it's definitely worth it. And that's going to pretty much wrap up the passive changes. Everything else that I didn't cover should be pretty self-explanatory, or it should be the same as the previous variant. Before we hop into the rest of the gear, I did just want to go ahead and cover the jewels since we are here. There are some pretty significant changes to the jewels. Starting off with the Heart of the Well, this is relatively similar to our previous one, but now not only are we getting gain chaos damage, we're also getting gain cold damage. This is obviously going to help us freeze more effectively. It's going to supplement the damage loss from Holopalm. In addition to that, when it comes to the Megalomaniac, I read your guys' comments, and I'm not ignorant to the fact that the Megalomaniacs got bought up almost instantly after my previous video. So now, like, the cheapest one you can find with, like, in my video, using my filter, you could see that there were Megalomaniacs for 5 div, 10 div, 11 div, 20 div, whatever the case may be. Now the cheapest one with my trade link is like 300 div. So, I mean, that shit just sucks. I apologize for it. Like, I don't know how I can solve that, but I did add additional notable options in the trade link. So there are more cheap ones in the trade link again, but they're going to get bought up again. So, I mean, this is just like a temporary solution. One specific notable I wanted to point out that I think could be very valuable for a lot of people is Splinters. I actually picked up a Megalomaniac with that right here. I've included this in the trade filter, and I'd recommend just taking a look at this. There's a twofold benefit to this one. One is the increased stun buildup. If you are someone that likes the buff, the projectiles from Staggering Palm, the increased stun buildup is obviously going to help you heavy stun more effectively. Therefore, you're going to be getting the buff more consistently. But then the second line is actually pretty important and unique. Hits break 50% increased armor on targets with ailments. If you are having inconsistency issues with Herald of Ice and Armor Explosion, the chain effect, then this should help significantly with that. There's no way for me to like 100% verify that it's going to work like it should, but as far as I can tell, this should make it significantly easier to meet the break point of chaos damage, because obviously the enemies that are getting exploded with Herald of Ice, or the enemies that are taking damage from the Herald of Ice explosion, are going to be chilled or shocked or both. So you'll be breaking 50% more armor or 50% increased armor on those targets, which is going to obviously help armor explosion get triggered much easier. So if you're having inconsistency issues, I would highly recommend trying to pick up a Megalomaniac with that notable allocated. You could even just get like a random other notable that doesn't matter to go alongside it. But the benefit of Splinters is that, or one other benefit of Splinters is this is a terrible notable for like most builds in the game. So the Megalomaniacs right now are very cheap, but they will probably get bought out. You know, there's nothing I can really do about that. But I thought I'd let you guys know, and I did include it in the trade filter. Beyond that, the final 2 jewels are really where the major significant changes have happened. Starting off with our From Nothing diamond. Well, of course, we did get an extra jewel socket as well. That is mandatory now. But our From Nothing has changed. So previously, it was giving us the ring around Zealot's Oath, which allowed us to allocate the 3 claw notables for a total of 75% increased attack damage, which is still very good for the previous Quarterstaff variant. But for the Holopalm variant, we've obviously changed it up. We are now getting the radius or the ring around Walker of the Wilds, which we already get ourselves, I know, but that's not the point. The point is to combine it with an Against the Darkness diamond that is giving us gain percent of damage is extra cold and gain percent of damage is extra chaos. And just to be kind of like specific, or just to get straight to the point, there are 7 notables allocated within the Against the Darkness ring, and we're able to allocate some of those for free, essentially, or for a lot less points than we would usually have to, thanks to the From Nothing diamond. So like this one, this one, this one, this one, even this one, we have allocated all of them without connecting them to our passive tree. In total, this is giving us 28% extra damage as cold and 21% extra damage as chaos. To illustrate just how important that is, our chaos top end on Herald of Ice, once again, is 1700. If I take the jewel out, it goes down to 650. So we're losing over 1,000 chaos damage by not having this jewel. Kind of goes without saying that the Against the Darkness and the new From Nothing, the combination of those two, is obviously a very key part to being able to make this build work. At the time of recording, I've got a trade link here. If I open it up, you can see looking for one with 3/3, which would be just fine. You can find them for 40 div. You've even got one here that's 4/3 for 40 div. You know, I hate to say it, but these will probably get bought up. I can't do too much about that. But that is, you know, it is what it is. That's what they are. I'm sure more people will start to farm Against the Darkness now that they've become more expensive. So hopefully more of them will get put on the market, and hopefully they won't be too expensive. Finally, let's go ahead and hop into the gearing section, and I have some good news for those of you that are already following the Quarterstaff variant that I posted a couple days ago and you've got that working. There's not many mandatory changes here, so I'll start with those. First off, obviously, we can't use a weapon anymore because we're using Hollow Palm, so if you're going to dive into the Hollow Palm setup, feel free to go ahead and sell your Quarterstaff, use it to fund other parts of the build. Outside of that, the only other mandatory change is we need to drop our Calandra's Touch for a ring with Leech physical attack damages mana. And of course, this is going to pair with Walker of the Wilds to give us infinite mana sustain. Previously, for those of you that are following the Flicker Strike build, you know that we like to put a Greater Mind Rune in our weapon, so that way we didn't have to get Leech physical attack damages mana on our ring or gloves, for example, and the one rune would solve the problem for us. Obviously, we can't use that rune anymore, so that's why we need the ring. If you really want to, for whatever reason, you could get this stat on your gloves as well, but I would advise against it because there's just really good stats to get on your gloves for suffixes, so I would highly recommend just getting it on your ring. I will also just point out that you technically don't need it. So like I'm going to just demonstrate for you. I have a pretty bad mana flask. Like this is not a good mana flask at all, but if I just run around with Tempest Flurry, and I use my mana flask, you can see that I'm able to out-sustain my Tempest Flurry cost. Granted, during maps, if you're running Elemental Expression, this will also use mana. But essentially, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you really don't want to, you don't even have to swap the ring. You can just drop Elemental Expression, replace it with I Am the Thunder, and then you can out-sustain your mana cost with just your mana flask. But I personally, if I can avoid using my flasks, I'm going to do what it takes to make that a reality. So getting the ring with Leech physical attack damages mana does that for us. Outside of that, there's no other mandatory changes. You're pretty much good to go if you've already got the previous variant working. However, I will just go ahead and quickly say that we are taking Chaos Inoculation, and this is because the third suffix here, we don't have access to a third resistance suffix on this ring. So I went ahead and just to make the transition a little bit easier for myself, I picked up Chaos Inoculation. I got rid of the Chaos resistance on my helmet. I swapped it out for lightning resistance. I also got a new chest piece, which has fire resistance. And that's pretty much all I did, but I just did that so that way I could supplement the loss of resistances that happened when I swapped my Calandra's Touch for this ring, because obviously Calandra's Touch was mirroring this one over here, which was giving me crazy resistances. I still have Chaos Res on this ring, which I need to go Omen of Light and get it off and get something different, but that's, a future project. Outside of that, though, those are the most important changes. Obviously, everything else is the same, so we're still, rocking gloves with triple rune sockets, attack speed, increased effect, flat damage, crit damage bonus. You do not need, people in the comments are sometimes a little goofy, you do not need a glove or a pair of gloves this expensive for the build to work. The only thing that actually matters on these gloves for the build to function is the triple flat damage. The crit damage bonus, the attack speed, the increased effective socketed items, none of that is mandatory. It just improves the efficiency of the build. The league has been out for over a month. I've got some good gear. Like, surprise, surprise. Yeah, I've got good gear. It is what it is. Like, I'll potentially make a budget variant of the build if I feel like that's super possible. But specifically when it comes to the gloves, you do not need a pair of gloves this expensive. I could swap these gloves for like 100 Exalt gloves, and I'd still be killing everything just as fast, or killing everything all the same. I would just be moving a bit slower. So something very important to keep in mind. We are using Headhunter still, because Headhunter just feels amazing. It's obviously one of the most fun belts in the game. You can change this out for a Darkness Enthroned with double attack speed runes. You could change this out for an Ingenuity. Both would be fine options completely. We're still using the same amulet. Amulet's very easy to craft. I'll once again include FG Corbin's amulet crafting video down below because it's very, very helpful. One thing I'll point out about the boots is we don't need movement speed on these anymore, so I'm actually going to swap these boots out. I'm going to completely drop movement speed on my boots, and I'm just going to go for massive evasion energy shield boots with resistances, rarity, all that good stuff. I'd recommend you do the same if you're rocking the hollow palm setup. So you could go ahead and sell your boots and get some better ones for like way, way cheaper because they won't have movement speed on them. And then outside of that, the chest piece and the helmet are the same. If you watched the previous video, you already know what's up, but we're obviously just getting massive energy shield or massive energy shield evasion in the case of the chest piece. And the suffixes are just usual suffixes, resistances, rarity, whatever you need, attributes if you need it, but you shouldn't. One thing for the chest piece, as I like to keep mentioning, faster start of energy shield. I put a high priority on this because I don't want to run convalescence. If you don't have faster start of energy shield recharge here on your chest piece, you're probably going to have to slot in convalescence, which is going to be pretty hard. So I would just highly recommend getting faster start of ES recharge on your chest piece. Outside of that, everything should be pretty self-explanatory. As I said in the previous video, and as always, I have trade links here in the Mobalytics Planner. I've got a section up here that explains how you can get a Chrome extension that will allow you to export items from the trade site into POB so you can see if it's worth buying. Super duper helpful. I completely explained that in the previous video. You can go check that out if you want. But yeah, I think that's going to pretty much wrap things up. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, if you found it helpful, make sure to subscribe, like, leave a comment down below. If you're having any issues, feel free to leave a question in the comments. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. You can join the Discord. We've got plenty of people in there that are willing to help. You can always try and @ me with your POB. I get back to as many of those as I possibly can. Try and help people kind of, shape up their character a little bit so everything's working smoothly. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed. Take it easy. I'll catch you in the next one. Later, chefs.